Alright, today in this video what we're going to look at is multiplying integers. Now if we remember, integers are positive and negative whole numbers. And so really our focus is not going to be on how do we multiply, it's going to be how do we multiply when we have a positive and a negative, two negatives, or what you're used to is two positives. So let's take a look at an example here. We'll get started with 17 times negative 5. So what this is really saying is that we have 17 groups of negative 5. So this could be 17 people that each owe $5 to something. Maybe you have like a, maybe you're buying something with 17 other people or 16 other people, and so you're figuring out how much money you're going to have total. So what we can do is you take 17 times 5, and so 7 times 5 is 35, carry the 3, and 5 times 1 is 5, plus 3 is 8. So we would all together owe a negative $85. So what that tells us basically here then is that if we have a positive and we multiply it by a negative, it will equal a negative. So let's take a look at another example. The rule here is I don't want you to get confused with multiplication rules as opposed to addition and subtraction rules. So here's another example. Let's say that we have negative 9 multiplied by 5. So again, we could say 5 people that owe negative $9. You could say negative 9 people that owe $5. That gets a little bit more confusing. But the same rule applies that we have positive times a negative equals a negative. So we multiply 9 times 5 like normal, and we get 45. And then since we have a negative times a positive, it is a negative. And we have this thing called the commutative property that allows us to flip around a problem and still get the same thing. So let me explain that really quickly. We could say negative 9 times 5. We could also say it as 5 times negative 9. Okay? We can commute or change the order of, because that's really what commute means, is going from one place to another. We can change the order and it does not change our solution. And so that's why we can have a positive times a negative equaling a negative, or we can have a negative times a positive equaling a negative. Now, the one that most people get confused on is this idea of a negative times a negative. So let's say we have negative 3 times negative 4. And when you start to try and think about like people and money, it kind of gets confusing because you're like, okay, so we have negative 3 people that each owe negative $4, and so it gets kind of confusing. Some people say, well, let's think opposites. So if we have the opposite of 3 times negative 4, so if this is negative 12, then the opposite of negative 12 is a positive 12. Main rule here, though, is that if we have a negative and we multiply it by a negative, it will come out to be a positive. So let's take a look at one more example that looks like that. Let's say we have negative 7 and we multiply it by negative 8. Okay. So 7 times 8 is 56, and since we have a negative times a negative, it's going to equal a positive. And so really one way that people can remember this, because sometimes we have problems where we have multiple numbers multiplied by each other, and so then we kind of are like, okay, is it going to be positive or is it going to be negative? And so we can look at it this way. If we have an even number of negatives, our answer will always be positive. If we have no negatives, then our answer will also be positive. If we have an odd number of negatives, then our answer will be negative. And in a sense, it's this idea of we're able to pair up these since a negative times a negative equals a positive. So we can do it that way. So let's take a look at, so let's say we have -3 times -2 times 4 times -5. So before we even start to multiply, let's even just take a look and say, okay, how many negatives do we have? We have 1, 2, 3. 3 is odd, okay? So if we know that 3 is odd, we know that odd number of negatives is negative. So we know that our answer is going to be negative. So now all our main focus is, okay, well, let's take 3 times 2, which is 6, multiply it by 4, which is 24, and then multiply that by 5, which is, well, we can come over here and say 24 times 5 is 0, carry the 2, and 12. So it's 120. So our answer then is -120. So once we use this rule, we're able to then just focus in on what 3 times 2 times 4 times 5 is, because we already know that our solution will come out to be negative. Let's take a look at one more example here. Let's just say 2 times -3 times -1 times -5 times -1 again. All right, so we look and we say, all right, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is even. So we have a positive solution. So now again, our focus then just comes on to multiplying. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 5 is 30. And 30 times 1 is 30. So we have a positive 30 as our solution. So hopefully this helped you. If you have any questions, you can post them in the bottom of this video or bring them into class. Thank you for watching.